Next one up, we have no other than Andrew Sandberg. Your roadmap already popped up on 2 of the speaking slides before. I don't think you need any further introduction, but you'll definitely be on 2 of our different slots here, on this one and then again in the space one on Grand Futures. But you've pretty much willed this field into being long before it was time, and many people are standing on your shoulders for making it happen. So thanks a lot.
I have so many people on my shoulders. Actually, this is one of
slides.
Well, I'm using this as notes, actually, but it probably takes too long to plug in slides when giving a lightning talk. So I'm mostly using this to improve my own very bad organic memory. So thanks everybody for both of the previous speakers referred to that old roadmap. And that roadmap was, of course, just based on, can we do this? What are the requirements for achieving brain emulation? Later on, I got into writing other papers, actually, is this feasible at all? What are the philosophical, scientific, neurological, and technological underpinnings? And then I ended up writing a paper back in 2014 about the ethics of brain emulation. How do we do it well in a moral sense? How do we do it good? And I think it might be useful to return to that, because we're actually getting to the point where we might actually have to start to think a little bit about ethics. And the ethics will matter long before we get to human-level brain emulation. And ideally, we want to make sure that the future is a good future, both nice and morally good. And that might mean that we have to consider this when we start this endeavor, because we might have to build in some ethical considerations in the projects as we're setting them up, because it might be darn hard to fix things once we're halfway through, and now we're realizing that we're standing on a small mountain of corpses, and we need to get to the top. Oh dear, this is not going to be nice. So if you can design it so you don't have to stand on a mountain of corpses from the start, that's good. And I think one of the earliest and most obvious applications of brain emulation is, of course, virtual lab animals. It's both something that we are going to use. We should not kid ourselves that there is not going to be a lot of mice and rats that are going to have a somewhat bad ending because of this. But the hope many people say is, we can then, instead of actually having those poor rats in the lab, we can do all the experiments on that software. And since software can't suffer and is easily available, everything is going to be great. This is where you get this funny situation where many of us transhumanists who think that, I want to be uploaded into the cloud and live forever, suddenly go, wait a minute, no, I think software could suffer. If software can't suffer, then uploading me into the cloud might actually mean that we have no phenomenologic state up there, and maybe it's not terribly useful to do it. You might still get, of course, digital minds that might still be valuable for a lot of other purposes. But many people with a more transhumanist bent would say, no, I'm kind of betting that software can have mental states. While many people who are very critical of doing experiments on animals, they have an incentive to hope that software can't suffer, so hence it's probably all right and we should just do it. They are, of course, wrong in another respect too, and that is we're not going to need any experiments, because making these emulations is going to require quite a lot of experiments. There is an interesting question, more philosophy of science, but also a lot of the practice of science, what we can learn from a simulation or emulation. How good does it have to be before we can actually start trusting the results? If I simulate a rocket and it looks like it's working, that's a good reason to build the rocket, but you still need to test it. For more complex systems, it might be much more unclear from a simulation what's going on. But from a philosophical standpoint, the really interesting thing is, of course, what's the moral weight of an emulation in the first place? I don't have the time to go into the whole discussion about the ethics of lab animals and different views on what's going on. But generally, one thing that everybody agrees on is that if you can actually get phenomenological suffering, that's bad. And that might mean that if I use my virtual reality glove and pinch the virtual tail of my mouse emulation in the simulation, and simulated C fibers transmit a signal to the simulated brain and produces a behavior in the medial pain system that makes the mouse now scurry off to a corner and squeak. Have I caused pain? It might be. Philosophers disagree quite strongly or profoundly about this, but it seems that a very simple maxim is just assuming the most. We have a system in reality, mice, that I'm not allowed to pinch their tails morally, because that produces bad mental states. And we have another system that's intended to be a one-to-one correspondence if we've done our work really well. Okay, we can't be certain that they actually have mental states. But it seems rather risky to assume that we have not. So up until you get evidence for the contrary, it might be a good reason to say, no pinching of virtual mice tails for no good reason. So we should be assuming that any emulated system should have the same mental properties as the original system and treat it correspondingly. This actually raises some interesting and annoying problems for us when we start getting into getting beyond the C. elegans and the fruit flies. Because it's not just that virtual suffering that we have to consider. We might want to think about the quality of the virtual life. You can't just put a lab mouse into any kind of box. You actually need to care for it a bit. Ideally, it should be a nice box. Okay. We know how to do that roughly. Many people might say we are actually not making them nice enough. This gets even more complex when you start realizing that I have to make that virtual box for my virtual mouse. And actually, I'm not simulating smells very well. We have good ideas in computer graphics about how to make visual environments that work. We can do on an auditory environment really well. We haven't done much work on simulating olfactory environment. And that's really important for rodents. That's how they generally get around. Most of them are nocturnal and don't really go for the vision part. So if we want to give them a good quality life, we better simulate the smells. And also in order to get them to behave right. This gets even more complicated when you get to the virtual dogs, etc. There is interesting aspects that you can do in an emulation that you cannot do in an animal. Like you can comment out part of the brain temporarily or permanently. You can basically interfere with the pain system with virtual painkillers that might in theory be much better than any real ones. There are also interesting questions about how long you run the simulations, etc. And a new question that has come up now in the last year that wasn't part of my original paper and actually suggests a really interesting sequel is, of course, is there any difference between a hi-fi and lo-fi version? If I take a mouse brain, slice it up, scan it, or I take a mouse and I record it and then I make a model work, should I treat both of these emulated mice in the same way? In the later case, I have a model that's not internally necessarily the same as the neural network I'm trying to emulate in the hi-fi case. It seems to me more plausible that the hi-fi case is more morally considerable. But can I be sure about the lo-fi case? That might actually be a really tricky issue to deal with. Now, the interesting part is, of course, that what then happens is as we get closer to human emulations, obviously now the ethical questions get bigger. But it also gets slightly easier because if you get a working human emulation, you can actually ask the emulated person, "Sir, do you feel fine?" The real problem comes if the emulation says, "No, I have a horrible headache. It's like 1,000,000 hangovers. Please turn me off." Okay, do I have an obligation to turn off that emulation? Oh, that gets to interesting questions. We get interesting issues about volunteers and the rights of emulation. We have to develop ways of handling distressed and flawed versions. Later on, as they become more functional in society, we end up with Robin Hanson's The Age of M scenario to some extent. We need to think about rights to participate online, the time rate blight. There are interesting issues about personal identity. Also interesting problems I get uploaded. I have several copies. To whom is Håkan married to? Yeah, he might flip a coin. And there is really interesting issues here about being vulnerable as software and the ownership of relevant information. To finalize this, if we get to human emulations in the full sense, it's economic plutonium, it's transforming the world. It will also have enormous social effect. There are interesting issues here about the ethics of species splitting. I think they're minor. There are some really important issues about does this increase various existential risks. But generally, my view is we have a very strong reason to want to not just be a multiplanetary civilization, but a multi-substrate civilization. Thank you.
I'm not stopping to clap.
Yeah.
We have time for one quick question.
Okay, I see one there.
How do you think about the ethics of foundation models and where they fit on the spectrum of ethical?
Yeah, I don't think anybody has a good handle on foundation models, whether they have an inner life or not. Murray Shanahan, who I respect a lot for being both a very good AI researcher and somebody who cares about consciousness, has written some very nice things about how tricky this problem is. A lot of people are very overconfident that, of course, they can't have any internal experience, or of course they have. It's tricky. I think we have this problem that they have been layered on with a lot of human stuff. And we experience things and we express that, and they're good at imitating that. So there is a lot of imitation going on, which is kind of hiding whatever is actually going on. And the problem with lo-fi approaches, to tie it back to brain immersion, is, of course, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to have a very good mouse foundation model that's going to be very good at imitating what mice does. And mice squeal when you pinch their tail, but that doesn't tell me whether that emulation is now actually suffering. So we might need to develop some better ethical tools here.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.